all our distinguished guests, scholars, and of course our main speaker, Dr. Krishnaswami Dara ji, and we in Gwalior, ITM from ITM University, Gwalior, and GSDS, Gandhian School of Socialism and Democracy. It is a newly established school. So on its behalf, I welcome all of you. And I also welcome Professor Anand Kumarji, who is supposed to come within few minutes. And the few words about this GSDS, I should say, and it is essentially a platform to promote understanding of the dynamics of the society with the a quest for freedom, justice, equality, fraternity, and in nutshell, it is a kind of enlightenment values, and of course, with an Indian perspective. And I have a pleasure to introduce the speaker of the session, Dr. Krishnaswami Dara ji, who is from JNU, and it is a great honor for all of us that a scholar who has been trained in political science in one of the most prestigious institutions of not only of this country but of the world, JNU is going to speak on the topic Jyotirao Phule, democratic equality and critical decoloniality. Dr. Dara did his PhD from JNU under the supervision of an eminent political scientist, Professor Valen Rodriguez, and the topic of his PhD was the idea of minority in Dr. Ambedkar's thought, equality and differentiated rights. And his PhD was awarded the best PhD by Nirman Foundation in 2007. So now I request Professor Dara to please enlighten us by his lecture on the theme. Please.
Okay, thank you for that warm welcome and warm words for me. I'm also very glad that other alumni from JNU are here, I think, and also some senior faculty or some senior professors whom I as a student studied are also part of this. So I thank the Gandhian Studies ITM University for inviting me, and also thank Randhir for also thinking of me. He was my student. When I was asked to speak on Phule, today is, I think, World Slavery Day, to remember this. So I think it's the right man to remember today. I think it's Frederick Douglass's memory. And for me, one of the most important things that I always point out when it comes to Phule's dedication in his book Gulamgiri to the slavery, to the struggle for slavery in America and against slavery in the United States. And so that so in that sense, this is the right intellectual and the right social reformer we are discussing today. Most people, I think, in the audience know what Phule is, and Phule's Phule's thought is, and to some extent Phule's contribution to Indian society is. But for the benefit of everyone, and also for those who don't know, I would like to repeat some basic things. First is Phule comes from Maharashtra, and Maharashtra, the condition of, particularly the condition of Shudras and Atishudras, that is the lower caste, was in a very bad situation. Not that in other states it was better, there is a particular historical context to which Phule is addressing. It's very, very important for us to understand the context that Phule is working in. And so within the region, what we present day call Maharashtra, there was what we call, what they call, or what Phule or what we call caste radicals call, Hindu rule, in a sense, rule by Hindus. That is the Peshwa rule. In Peshwas, under the Peshwas, kind of implementation of Hindu legal system, or Hindu legal system was implemented. In this, caste practices, practices of discrimination, practices of gender discrimination, caste discrimination, and all kinds of discriminations were practiced, or were enforced through the institution of the state, and also and the use of law was heavily heavy in these regions. So when thinkers like Ambedkar or Phule are talking about Manusmriti or Hindu rule or Hinduism, they are not speaking out of some textual way of looking at it. They had real concrete experience, particularly people like Phule, about the very nature of Hindu rule in Maharashtra. This is something that is easily forgotten when we have not experienced what is experienced as what is called when Hindu rule is implemented, particularly when Manusmriti or Manusmriti, not directly or literally, but the ideology of Manusmriti is implemented. The effects of it, the power of it has been forgotten by us. So one way to understand Phule is to understand the context in which Phule is working in. But one of the things that happened in Phule's time, or just before Phule, is that the British have overtaken, and the Peshwa rule Peshwa rule ends, and after the end of Peshwa rule, the British take control. This coming of the British produces what I call a kind of an epistemic opportunity to the lower caste, such as Shudras and Atishudras. A brief word about who are Shudras. In the Maharashtra context, the term that is used by Rosalind Hanlon is what we call Marathi Kunabi complex. There are many kinds of castes, and there were traditional Kshatriya rulers, and there were, but in Maharashtra, the Brahmins took the role of Kshatriya rule, and they justified this through mythological narratives, such as the figure of Narsimha, the Brahminical Kshatriya warrior who killed the Kshatriyas. So the Peshwas and the controlled the state, and there were very, very strict regulation and implementation of the Hindu rule. Therefore, much before Ambedkar burns Manusmriti, if you look at the writings of Jyotirao Phule, there is citations, a critique of Manusmriti and other Hindu texts we can see in his writings. So so this is the context in which I think that we need to understand the socio-historical background. Phule's most of his writings and most of his energy is to awaken the consciousness of what he calls his Shudra brethren and Atishudra brethren. In his life, he works a lot to establish schools, and one of his first radical acts is to adopt a Mahar boy or an untouchable boy as his son, and also allowing untouchable students into his school. So therefore, the distinction between Shudra and Atishudra is something that is broken by Phule in that sense, because one of the logics of caste is to make this distinction between Shudras and Atishudras. So Phule radically tries to break this distinction and tries to speak both for Shudras and Atishudras. That is very, very radical. And along with this, Phule also starts to speak for women, including upper caste women, and his writings are today if you look at his writings, he's supporting upper caste women radicals like Tarabai Shinde, Pandit Ramabai, and all these other writers. He's similar people like them. He's supporting them against Hindu patriarchy. So in this sense, Phule is radically trying to what we call deconstruct the hegemonic hold of Brahminic control of Indian society. For this, he gets help from Christian missionaries, of course. The Christian missionaries played a very, very important role all over India, particularly in Maharashtra. Plus, Christian missionaries were in power, so they used that status also to criticize a lot of Hindu practices, and they had a nexus with Phule in a sense. So in Satya Sodak Samaj, we can see that Phule is working along with Christian missionaries, and they were part of the association in which Phule is working. So one of the important things that the Christian missionaries have been arguing is that the Hindu religion has Hindu religion with its hierarchies of caste and its in its metaphysics of trying to divide God into different parts, and telling that human beings belong coming from different parts of this Godhead. Produces a kind of religious inequality, and that produces a kind of what is called religious merit, and therefore that produces, and then this origin thesis of man coupled with the theory of karma, where one's present actions plus inactions are the rewards of the present actions and inactions are transferred to your next birth or your next janma. In that sense, this transfer of merit from one birth to the next produces an interesting theory of how different human beings deserve to be treated, and therefore the Brahmins, because of their previous birth merit, have the right to have certain entitlements which other castes, particularly Shudras and Atishudras, do not get, including women. So both the Christian missionaries and Phule together, main job is to attack and criticize this metaphysics of hierarchy, in that sense, we can say, and then it's grounding in religious dogma, religious explanation. One of the main critiques that Phule is also going to offer is that Hinduism, obviously, for those who know, is a false religion. It's a construct. It's a device. It's a construct that is meant purely for maintaining the privileges of the Brahmins at the cost of other lower castes. So therefore Hinduism is a false religion. So that doesn't mean all religions are false. There is true religion versus false religion. For him, Islam, Christianity, and all these other monotheistic religions, where they don't they don't make a distinction, at least in front of God, that all are creatures of God equally. All these religions are what he calls true religions. But any religion that denies equality in front of God or in front of supreme being is a false religion. So therefore, much before someone like Gramsci is going to come, Phule is already trying to see the power of how religion can be used by a particular class or a particular group that arrogates itself the power to mediate between man and God. So in that sense, most of his writing is to criticize the underlying assumptions, the underlying main theories plus underlying assumptions of that. For this, the help of Christian missionaries and what I call Western epistemes or Western knowledges for Phule is becomes very useful. In this sense, the epistemic injustice that someone like Phule was experiencing, thanks to Christian missionaries. In fact, he even acknowledges and appreciates the Muslim rulers, or what he calls Badshahs, for also helping, for also in a sense criticizing Hinduism, or also saving Shudras from this what he calls horrible superstitious and false religion. He has many bad words for Hinduism or Hindu practices and texts. By epistemic injustice, I'm using the concept of Miranda Fricker, where one does not have the language, one does not have the language, or one does not have the right kind of concepts to criticize and to articulate what one is experiencing. So I'm just trying to imagine when there was no colonial rule and there was no Christian missionaries or what we call Islamic rule in India, the language to criticize the system had to come from within. That could have been very difficult in a context where the hegemony and the power of the Brahmins is almost total. So in that sense, the colonial rule produces a kind of a space in which what we call caste radicals could speak and provide what we call epistemic justice, we can also call it an epistemic opportunity to criticize the system. And therefore, Phule completely exploits this experience, this epistemes, or this ways of looking at the world from secular models that is brought in by Westerners and also Christian missionaries. In fact, Rosalind Hanlon argues that the Christian missionaries projected themselves that there is no a neat dichotomy between secular worldview, secular scientific worldview, and the Christian worldview. At least in the rhetorics, they projected to the Maharashtrian society as if that Christian values are in sync with secular values. So this helps. So therefore, in one of his writings, particularly in the Cultivator's Whipcord, I think the 4th chapter, where Phule uses Darwin's argument about the evolution of man, a kind of using of Darwin's argument with a kind of a social contract, what we call a philosophical anthropology about how the Brahmins came into power. So he has how man was in nature and where there was abundance, and then slowly as population increases, then there were societies emerging. From societies, states emerge. From states, and from states to these strong states. Plus, then he goes on to the battle between the Aryans and the non-Aryans, which is again mostly known to most people, that ultimately one of the main key arguments of Phule is that the Brahmins, origin of Brahmins come from Iran, and that part of their Aryans coming from outsiders, and they come and win over or defeat the locals and push them into this, and what he calls dasyus. So the word das and dasyus also are linked in this sense. So therefore, the lower castes are erstwhile aborigines or originals in this region. So by this, he tends to make not just the Brahmins as the other in the other of human, but also the other in the geographical sense. And this also works against the Brahmins, because the Brahmins could argue the Sudras and the upper caste, that is the Savarnas and Sudras, should join together to fight the outsider like the British or the Muslim. By arguing that the Brahmin himself is an outsider, he tries to also delegitimize their argument. Apart from this angle to his critique of the Hinduism and its ideology of hierarchy and ideology of hierarchy, Phule is at pains to explain. In fact, if you keep reading, it's like it's writing pages of how the Brahmins have been exploiting the Shudras and Atishudras. This is something very, very important, because when we talk of colonial exploitation, and particularly when I see this decolonial theorization, there's a lot of emphasis about colonial exploitation, particularly by Europeans. But if you look at Phule's writings, the emphasis is much strongly on the exploitation of what we call, what has been called internal colonialism. So therefore, in fact, he tends to see the exploitation by the Brahmins as much more insidious and painful, not just in the material sense, but also the exploitation is in the psychological sense of completely denying the humanity of the Shudra and Atishudra, of course. So through his writings, he is very, very vehement, and also we can say acerbic about Brahminical domination. One of the interesting things about his style of presenting his argument is he's not, in my view, not trying to entirely appeal to the rational side to the Shudra consciousness. There is also a rhetorical side to Phule, and so therefore, if anyone who's new to Phule's writings and does not understand context, a lot of what Phule is writing seems to be irrational, or sometimes even politically incorrect in that sense. So, but I think if you go to the context and he's trying to communicate to his audience, we need to understand the Maharashtra at that time and what is the conceptual given in that society. Phule is appealing to the Shudra consciousness and also trying to produce a rift between the hegemonic consciousness, hegemonic ideas that have been dominating Shudra and Atishudra consciousness, and trying to break them away from this domination. And it's not an easy task, because he himself has been criticized by his own caste members and his caste community, and also he's been criticized for accepting a Dalit boy as a son, and also allowing Dalit students into his school. So therefore, he knows the difficulties that are involved in trying to fight Brahminic hegemony. So therefore, one of the things that I find it very fascinating and interesting about Phule is that he understands that not everything can be appealed to pure rational nature of rational aspect to human thought, but also we need to also appeal to what we call the affective side of human consciousness. I think one can credit Phule with probably as a practical man who is concerned about transforming society. I think both the affective side, that is the emotional side, and the experiential side of what is it to be Shudra, and also the concept, the logical side, the rational, the minimum rational core that exists in most human beings. He's appealing to these two terrains to try to deconstruct what has been constructed for centuries in the minds of Shudras. In that sense, Phule, I think, was in a sense is what we can call predates, or a kind of a proto-Gramscian who's able to see religion as not purely as something that exists to deal with your spiritual cravings, but also religion can be used as a tool to exploit others. So therefore, so he's trying at pains to explain the distinction between true religion and religion as an ideology of what religion as a belief, religion as a faith, and religion as an ideology. What someone like Ashish Nandi would make a distinction in his book, The Intimate Enemy. So in this sense, so most of the arguments that Phule gives, particularly therefore he engages with the myths. He engages with myths and tries to reconstruct these myths, and also tries to introduce a certain criticality into understanding these myths. And I'm repeating the power of these myths, because most Shudras did not have access to what we call the Vedas, or this main classical text. So therefore, most of the way that religion that is experienced is through these Puranas, these stories. So therefore, what Phule does is to engage with these stories, and in such a way as to reinterpret it in a way that produces a kind of critical distance to what it is initially intended from his point of view. For example, his critique of from the mouth comes the Brahmins, from the shoulders come the Kshatriyas, from the belly comes the Vaishyas, and from the legs come Shudras. For example, he uses this metaphor of menstruation very frequently. We're saying that if from God mouth comes, that means he uses saying that the God must be menstruating from his mouth. So he uses a kind of a practical experience that people have about what they know is reproduction or biological reproduction, and then he uses these day-to-day experiences to criticize what he thinks is the irrational side to the construct, the basic ideological construct behind Hindu caste system. In this sense, Phule is one of the initiators of critique of the caste system. One of the first people, at least we know, probably there were other critiques. Before Phule, there were kind of critiques like Tukaram and Bhakti traditions, which critiqued certain aspects of Hinduism, but it was mostly giving solace to the individuals against caste practices. So a kind of a therapeutic approach was adopted before someone like Phule comes. So therefore, saying if you look at old Bhakti traditions and like even Kabir and this, so what matters is your sincerity, your authenticity, your honesty in relation to God and relationship to the universe or to other human beings. Humanity was emphasized before, but with Phule and we should only, though I'm using the word Phule, I have, when I'm using the term Phule, I also have Pandit Tarmabai, Tarabai Shinde, Savitribai Phule, Fatima Sheikh, all of them I have in mind when I'm talking about Phule. So I'm just using Phule in this sense in fact, I'm also having Ambedkar in mind, because if you look at Ambedkar, who comes much later in that sense, in 1891 he is born. By this time Phule is most work is done. So in that sense, Ambedkar is trying to carry the legacy that Phule built. So therefore, we can see a link between what Ambedkar later does to what Phule is doing. So so all these caste radicals, along with caste radicals, got a space, a space where they could use the colonial systems, colonial government, the British government, as a means to fight their immediate oppressor, that is the Brahmins. And one of the important points that has to be remembered is that in Phule's writings, it is he's not simply criticizing Hindu practices, Hinduism as a religion, but also the infiltration of Brahmins and upper caste, particularly what he calls into the British system, and how there is a nexus, unholy nexus between what the Britishers and the Brahmins together are denying the rights of the masses, in this case Shudras and Atishudras. So it is so in a sense we we have to see that there is the upper castes in India are also the beneficiaries of colonialism. Uh, Although they later project themselves as the enemies of colonialism, or the liberators against the Britishers, but it's obvious to most, we know that the upper caste as a class has benefited from colonialism, and also to some extent from its coloniality. Of course, it produces two kinds of upper caste. One who are what they call comprador intellectuals. This decolonial school calls it comprador intellectuals, and also the critiques against this. But as a class, the upper caste, particularly the Brahmins, have benefited from colonialism. That is something that I feel is missed in when today the term decolonization, decoloniality is used. So in this sense, Phule is also Phule, although wants to use the Britishers against the domination of Brahmins, to use the British rule as a means to fight Brahminical domination. We know that in the end, we know that the Britishers have not actually helped the Shudras and Atishudras. In fact, they in fact strengthened the Brahminical power in Indian society. At least that could be what we call it, the Dalit Bahujan critique of the British rule. So in this sense, we can say, though there are opportunities that are provided by colonial rule, but at the same in the end, the upper castes have benefited from colonialism more than anyone else. So we can use someone like Phule and Ambedkar, particularly Phule, as a critique of Britishers, but the critique is not against the ideology of colonialism. The critique is not against the values or what the rhetoric of what colonialism is. What Phule does is he uses the rhetoric of colonialism, of giving democracy, republicanism, rights, against the Britishers, for saying this is what you claim that you are giving us, but actually you are denying this to the masses. And then also criticizing, and the words he uses mostly are, when he's in his letters, he's very respectful to these. He uses the word Sahib to most of the British officers, but at the same time, the words that he uses most of the Britishers are indulgent, lazy, or too bothered about themselves, too arrogant, and therefore, so in a sense, and also least bothered about what they claim to be in their rhetoric. So in that sense, he does not completely criticize Britishers, but wants to change their consciousness to speak or work for the benefit of the Shudras and Atishudras. So in this sense, it's a much more complex critique of colonialism, but it's also using certain knowledge system. For example, he cites Thomas Paine. He also cites Frederick Roosevelt. One of the other interesting things is about conceptually linking Shudra's struggle to the struggle of the blacks, and also connecting the Shudra struggles to the struggles of Native Americans. This is also something I find very radical in Phule, where he sees the so-called Aryan domination is not just limited to the Indian context. So in that sense, racism of the whites in United States, and also the extermination and the violence that is done to Native Americans, also he sees them as fellow brethren. So in that sense, he tries to build at least a solidarity with these struggles that are going on, along with other forms of colonialism. So therefore, um, so he is not directly fighting the Britishers, but he's supporting the exploitation and oppression of other within quote the Shudras of the rest of the world, and also building solidarity and demanding that if you have to fight for your own freedom, that's what he's telling you. You should also fight for blacks and others. Um, at the same time, he's also critiquing the Brahmins for this false narratives, false, or what he calls, I'm not exactly able to remember, for fooling the Shudras or obfuscating the struggle by saying that the enemy is the Britishers. So therefore, one of the interesting game that I think I want to come to is the play of guilt. If generally post-colonial theory and generally this acceptance of decolonial theory by upper caste intellectuals, whether it is the Hindutva, extreme right-wing nativist positions, or the more sophisticated versions, is generally to introduce guilt into the Western European this thing. And obviously the colonizer, the British and the Europe also had to introduce guilt into what we call the Indian elites or Indian oppressors. So I think the blame game in a sense, which is that it's all about Europe. So I think one of my worries and one of the reasons I wanted to use the word critical decoloniality is the way it has been used in a regular way is to fight the epistemic violence that Europe and European thought has done. I want to use the word critical in the sense where one needs to fight the epistemic violence that is done by Europeans on the rest of the world, but at the same time, the epistemic violence, the violence that is done by what we call internal colonialism, has to be handled at the same time. So in that sense, by criticality, I mean one shouldn't, and also one shouldn't. Of course, this is said by a lot of decolonial writers and writers that one cannot simply take the experiences of other colonialisms and other oppressions and simply bring in those concepts and apply it here. But still there seems to be a certain way in which certain concepts developed by Latin American theories are, in a sense, although there's a pretense of being critical, I don't think they have not been critical enough about the way these concepts are imported into Indian social theory. And one other critique that I think is very, very important from the Phule Ambedkar complex, or what I would say a Phulean ways, what is from a Phule's point of view would be, we need to also critique the link between knowledge production, where it is produced, and also the institutions, that is the structures, that is the institutional structures that produce this. Most of the time, it seems to be this seems to be much more a kind of taking a different theoretical stand or an intellectual stand against this, but very less I find the critique of the materiality of this knowledge production, that is the institutions that exist globally, both within India and in the West. That means the domination of certain castes and groups within our institutions, like in our universities, in our media, and all these things, and also the domination of certain groups in the West by whites in the West and these things. Therefore, not simply it is about giving space to every point of view, but also critiquing the inbuilt power, the hidden power that exists within our institutions, the rules and the dominance of these groups also should be questioned when we have to critique what I mean by critical decolonization in that sense. I'm not saying anything new, but I think Phule would be in that. And in fact, if you look at Ambedkar particularly, Ambedkar is not, generally Ambedkar is shown by, Ambedkar is shown to be a guy who was much more a kind of a colonized guy by the West. In fact, someone like Aditya Nigam writes that Ambedkar's writing in English is a kind of a proof that Ambedkar is colonized by Western categories, Western epistemes. But I think that seems to be a very simplistic view, because Ambedkar's later work, engagement with Buddhism, Ambedkar's later argument that democracy is not purely an Western idea. So in that sense, at least this tradition also looks at, does not accept Western terms and Western categories blindly, and also retains certain universal element within its critique of both the West and also the Eastern forms, or our own Indian forms of exploitation and or Indian forms of colonization. So I don't know how much time I have taken, but I would like to end with, though I wanted to talk about Phule, I want to end with Ambedkar here. Ambedkar, I think in one of these, I think speeches somewhere says that we should stop blaming the Westerners or Britishers for everything. Now we have freedom, and we should take responsibility for ourselves and start reforming our society. So I think in that sense, that is the spirit with which I'm using the term decoloniality. And since as one of the earlier theories were proto theories of social and political theory in India, we can see Phule as one of the first philosophers to critique Indian society, not only metaphysical, but also critiquing society, starting a kind of a social theory that critiques Indian society. He was fighting for equality of almost at a very substantive sense. And therefore, one cannot separate democracy with look at equality and democracy as two different concepts. So therefore, I think fundamentally Phule is what I call the initiator of what we call democratic equality in Indian society, and of course, carried forward. That movement was carried forward by Ambedkar, and of course the struggle for democratic equality has not ended, it's still in the going. I would like to end my talk. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dara, as usual. Very insightful and very engaging, I would say. And your deliberation is a kind of invitation for all of us to understand the quest of social democratization process initiated by Phule, and also understanding his quest of empowering the voice of voiceless, or for that matter, inculcating or rather empowering the subaltern consciousness and feminist quest. So it was really very insightful session. I can see so many comments in the chat box. But first, I would like to invite some of our discussions. And Professor Anand Kumar Giri has raised his hand. So first, I would like to invite Professor Anand Kumar Giri to kindly be precise in question or comments, because I know Professor Dara first take the question and immediately answer. So because he forgets sometime when you ask so many questions. So first, Professor Anand Kumar Giri, ask your question and then we'll move ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Dara. Thank you, Randhir. And because I have to rush for another engagement, so I am sorry to raise my hand first. Thank you, Dr. Dara. Now, you mentioned Phule also made a critique of the colonial, and this critique of the colonial is at the level of lack of match between rhetoric and reality. But my query is, that is there something more to Phule's engagement with the colonial? Therefore, the decoloniality that you are speaking about, look at, for example, Pandita Ramabai. Now, Phule supported Pandita Ramabai, and Pandita Ramabai had a critique of the Anglican Church, though she accepted Christianity. So I request you to kindly elaborate if a foundational critique of colonialism as a structure of violence, as it also provided epistemic opportunity.
Okay. Shall I respond one after the other, or?
If you can note down all these questions and
Okay.
then respond, then we can save some time.
Now, one request, Randhir, I am leaving now in a few minutes, and
Yes.
I would, if you
Okay.
can
Sure.
kindly.
Dr. Dara, please respond.
I think there is, in what I have looked at Phule's writings, there is no direct critique of any Western epistemic practice or this, but I think the support for blacks and critique against race, and the support for exploitation against racism of all kinds. I think that because it's in this context that which he is in, he would, in a sense, is providing a critique about the contradictions that colonialism claims to be, and also behind its rhetoric and what it actually does. And also his critique about the nexus between the Brahmins and the British in that sense. So it's not an explicit critique, at least to what I have read. I have not come across any kind of a Western direct critique of that, but he's using the West as a resource. I hope I have answered that sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Gyan. Professor Gyan Gului, please share your comment.
Well, it was very interesting. I unfortunately do not know very much about this subject. As perhaps said, I would like to know something more about the relationships with Ambedkar, because I am very curious on the formation of Ambedkar, and therefore I would like to know more on the subject of the influence which were exercised on Ambedkar and on his education. I thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Yes. Should I respond immediately, or shall I collect the questions?
Please collect the questions so that
Yes.
we can save some time.
Yes.
And there is a question asked by Kashif Yunus. He's asking that is there any relevance of Phule teaching and philosophy on Muslim community, particularly lower caste? So,
Is there any relevance of
Muslim community, Phule's philosophy for Muslim community?
In fact, he is constantly in praise of the followers of Muhammad for liberating Shudras from the what we call from the horrors of Hinduism, or what we call Hindu practices. So at least for Phule, Islam is a true religion compared to a false, pretentious religion like for him is Hinduism. So so probably he's using these as a resource to critique Christianity, Islam. Even Islam, he thinks the Badshahs have, but he again criticized the Badshahs for listening to, he says, listening to Tansen's music and becoming indulgent and self-indulgent and not doing enough for everyone, including the Hindus and Muslims. So again, by list, the Brahmins again corrupt the. So it's not simply against corruption against British rule, but also he's critiquing the how Brahmins have corrupted the Mughal rule also. I hope I have answered something to that question.
Yes. Chanda Ashani is asking, was there any reference Jyotirao Phule made about how caste originated?
He uses a kind of what we call a philosophical anthropology, and with certain references with at that time the British historians have been writing. There's a book, I think 3,000 years back, India 3,000 years back. I'm forgetting the author. So he's using this Aryan invasion theory, and there were already existed a discourse about the fight between what was the fight between the what we call the outsiders and insiders, and because the earlier engagement with classical texts were looking at words, the metaphors that were used in Vedas and in the earlier Rigvedic texts, and trying to figure out what was the actual struggle all about. So in that sense, he uses a kind of a deductive analysis of how caste could have come. Obviously, the story about coming from the head, coming from the legs, that mythic story he would not accept, and he would try to construct a kind of a proto-historical analysis. Yeah.
So any friend, if he or she asks any question, please indicate me in the chat box.
So I will, I'm finding it slightly difficult to pronounce this name.
Professor Gyan Guloi.
Gyan Guloi, thanks a lot for your question. In fact, the more I engage with Phule, I see a lot of Ambedkar already in Phule's thought, except in this certain theories of race. When it comes to theories of race, Ambedkar is much more influenced by the work of Franz Boas and his initial teacher, that is Golden Weiser, and so a kind of new kind of anthropology was emerging in 1910s and 1920s. So Ambedkar completely kind of questions this theory of Aryan theory of race. So in that sense, there is a difference between Phule and Ambedkar when it comes to the battle between Aryans and non-Aryans, outsiders and insiders. But when it comes to the ideological critique, I think Ambedkar is with Phule, where Manusmriti is what is an ideological position for them. That classic, it's a text that produces a particular ideology, and therefore Ambedkar is practically almost, in fact, if you look at Ambedkar's critique of Manusmriti and Ambedkar's critique of Hindu legal system or Hindu law, a lot of what he's saying synchronizes with what Phule is talking about. Particularly, Phule is talking about how, for example, a Brahmin killing a Shudra is almost literally killing an animal. So therefore, a small penance would do. So Ambedkar would call this what I call a no law at all. In some other paper I've talked about, it's I'm using Robert Alexi's work about an evil law, the Nazi rule as well. So he, in fact, I try to compare that Manusmriti is equal to the law in the Nazi times. So in that sense, it's a pseudo law again. So the Hindu law is not just a religion for Ambedkar, it's also not a law in that sense, because one of the fundamental aspects of law for Ambedkar is, again, equality. So for the same crime, same punishment should be given. But Manusmriti violates that fundamental thing about any idea of law. There's a book by Alexia about argument from injustice. So I was surprised to see that Phule gives exactly a similar argument about how the Brahminical Manusmriti in this, and again I'm repeating myself that this law was not just in the text. These laws were implemented in India just earlier before the British took over India. So in terms of gender also, I think Phule and Ambedkar are a lot of similarity in that sense. So in that sense, Phule also produces the ground. In fact, not just Phule, even someone like Pandita Ramabai converts to Christianity, which is a very radical Brahmin Pandita, and that's so she's not simply converting to Christianity, it's also a protest kind of way against Hinduism. So much before Ambedkar, there are these caste radicals who are protesting against Hindu practices or Hinduism itself as an, for them at least, it's an oppressive ideology. I hope I've answered your questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Miniti Pradhanji?
Yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I would like to thank Professor Dara for very excellent and deep presentation. So my question is a little bit, maybe not in the topic. So sir said, no, the mythological figures were interpreted through the caste lens, like Narsimha Avatar and the things that
Yeah.
interpreted. In that sense, we find mostly the what is called so-called Sudra and Ati Sudras, they're the worshipper of Shakti because it gives them the freedom. Whether Phule was the supporter of that Shakti worshipping, and when you say that he said the Hindu religion is false, I was wondering, women are being discriminated in all religion. It is not only in Hindu. I hope you agree. It is not. Why? I mean, how do you view it? Then the second question is
I think I did not get the first part of your question. Your second part I've understood is women are discriminated in all religions.
Yeah. That is no. I was just telling those few things. This is how it's not that religion has been interpreted. So the second question is, we were telling upper class women were supporting patriarchy. What were the reasons? Why they were supporting?
Upper caste women
supporting patriarchy. What were the reasons? And what were the views of Vedas in Phule's eye? So
views of
Veda, different Vedas,
the classic Vedas.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I don't think I can give a satisfactory answer, but the one which is not directly linked with Phule is, why do upper caste women support patriarchy, right? That I think for me is the easier one. It's because any exploitative system or any system does not completely denies you everything. It gives you something in some form. So particularly if you are in the upper layers, if you are a woman, patriarchy denies a lot of things for you, but at the same time there are also certain benefits for upper caste women. They get material as well as psychological benefits, the sense of being superior. I'm not able to remember the scholar, this famous this German sociologist talks about the concept of jouissance. He explains the concept of jouissance can be applied about the feeling that you're a superior caste. Though jouissance is a kind of taking pleasure out of a particular pain in the Lacanian analysis. So so in this sense, upper caste women have certainly benefited from the caste system, and the patriarchy, though is oppressive, has to some extent it has been much more tolerable for them. But we should not forget someone like Pandita Ramabai, Tarabai Shinde, and all these women have fought against Brahminical patriarchy. So there are upper caste women who have fought against Brahminical patriarchy, but over a period of time, probably now we can see a lot of upper caste women going to supporting Brahminical patriarchy, because so-called the benefits of certain egalitarian movements have first went to the upper caste women. I hope I have given some answer to that. Second question is, if women are discriminated against in all religions, why only Hinduism? Why only Hinduism is targeted? But there is a particular way in which Hinduism looks at women. For example, I will use Tarabai Shinde's argument. For example, if you apply the theory of karma, so being born as a woman is a punishment for your previous existence, previous births. So therefore, you know that having a son means putra. That means one who gives access to heaven. So already being born as a woman is a punishment. So basically, in fact, that's the word Tarabai Shinde uses. Therefore, from the Hindu conceptual form, if you're born as a woman, you're already in a life prison. You're what you call, you're getting punished for your past deeds. Therefore, you are what I call prison sentence. What is called, you have a life sentence. So therefore, you don't have rights in that sense. You have rights to a certain extent to produce because you give offsprings. So probably in your next birth you might get a better birth, but in this you are being punished for being this. I think other religions, there are a lot of discriminatory practices in other religions. I don't think that in other religions there might be views that women are inferior or naturally they build on this natural inequality. But in the Hindu traditions or the Hindu practices, it's not about natural inequality. It is your previous birth, the what I call your merit in the past, your demerit in the past has to be reworked here in that sense. So in that sense, Hinduism is unique in that sense. Therefore, killing the girl child is not a big crime from that point of view, because and when it comes to his views of the Vedas, I think he thinks that a lot of texts or Vedas are simply, I can probably take the liberty to say, empty moralizing about be truth. If you look at Manusmriti also, there are a lot of moral arguments: be truthful to your others, be nice to others, and be this, don't cheat, and all that things are there. But the deeper underlying logic is to produce this hierarchy of human beings. I think I've answered all the three.
Yes, very good answer. And your
Thank
answer
you.
Thanks.
is very also thought-provoking. So Dr. Sipra, Dr. Sipra Sagrika.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes, I'm unable to make my camera on because of this electricity issue over here. So thank you, sir. Thank you for this enlightening speech and enlightening presentation of entire relationship of how we can understand caste and dynamics of upper caste women. Actually, I wanted to give one of my like reflections on Uma Chakravarti. And as she has worked a lot on how upper caste women, they find themselves in a disadvantageous position as compared to low caste women because of the property issues. What would you like to suggest in terms of the association of upper caste women and property, and low caste women and not having that much of property, and they can accordingly deal the entire caste system? I would like to know your reflection on this.
Thanks a lot. I'm a big fan of Uma Chakravarti. I agree with her a lot, but I'm beginning to move away from this where we say that upper caste women are more victim than lower caste women. We know that oppression is a very complex phenomenon, and we cannot speak of oppression in a very flat terms. So all of oppression, whether it's the blacks or all oppressions have much intersectionality built into this, and much complexity and laidness built into it. So there could be in some ways in which upper caste women are much more disadvantaged than lower caste women. In, for example, the ideas of purity, for example, in lower caste houses, when women menstruate or experiencing periods, they don't need to be practicing very purificatory processes compared to upper caste families. But I think in a lot of other ways, the trade-off is that in terms of food, in terms of food security, in terms of comfort, bodily comfort, in terms of psychological sense of superiority, in terms of some experience of power, I think that upper caste women on an whole are much more advantageous than a low caste woman. In certain aspects, maybe there are certain disadvantages in comparison. But overall, I think one shouldn't completely see that upper caste women building solidarity with Shudra Ati Shudras, because upper caste women also are invested in caste practices. They're kind of always seeing women as victims, seems to be, I think, I'm one of those who's trying to move away from that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. A really exciting response from you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sipra. I think we are also running out of time. So I have two queries. Because I got some comment in our feedback form or registration form that usually the word decolonization, that is a kind of political program that has the potential to challenge and largely transform many of the political or social or legal assumptions of Western society. But when we use this word, particularly in Indian society, maybe we can use the word subaltern decolonization. But in generally, decolonization gives a sense of anti-Western or some, and that incorporates France and England. So maybe when we use the word decolonization, one contested thing that we have in terms of comments of our participant is like, maybe because it is very difficult to say, because Phule was a kind of not very anti-colonial in that sense. And when we are using that, his conception in decolonize, that actually gives a kind of some dicey assumption. My second query regarding his why he used the character of Bali for fighting the hegemony of Brahminical domination, although he did not use the word anything against Hinduism, he used Brahminism, against Brahminism. So, and at the same time, he using the word character of Bali from his, they say, the mythical text of Ramayana. So, if you can answer, why did he use the character Bali? In what sense?
The first critique is a very powerful one, so I would like to deal with that. I am not kind of a defender of decoloniality, decolonial theory, because there are a lot of problems with this theory of what is called decolonizing theory or decoloniality. There are issues with that. One, what George Hull calls it, it can be what is called ethno-relativism, which he differentiates it from what we call discourse relativism. So I'm not a relativist in this sense. Plus, I think the way the term, there's a certain insight too in which we can say that we need to criticize the European categories and the domination that exists within European things. But I don't want to completely give up the term colonization to only post-colonial decolonization. Of course, they have used the term, but I'm trying to use the term differently. That's why I'm applying critical decoloniality in the sense where I'm not trying to use the term exactly the way these things. In the sense, what I'm trying to say that this term, probably we should decolonize decolonial theory itself, because decoloniality or decolonization is not only a property of these, is not the personal property of these theorists. So one of the reasons I have deliberately put the word decoloniality is to say that Walter Mignolo or this whole group, or they are not the end of beginning and end of decolonization, or those who, of course, we can learn from them a lot. But our project, what I'm trying to say is that my project is to learn that if there are the link between modernity and capitalism, for example, the way they are linking it, there is something to which someone like Phule would also agree with, but for him it is two evils, right? One is the colonialism, and then there is Brahminical colonialism in what we call. So therefore, when we use decolonization only for a specific form of colonization, then I find it's in a sense they're appropriating the term decolonization for a particular critiquing the West. You understand what I mean? I'm trying to reappropriate it in that sense. Okay. And therefore, I'm trying to use critical is that where I'm trying to say that by using critical, I'm using this from the German critical tradition of where I don't want to end up with the relativism of what is called nativism, or what has been called nativism and indigeneity. So I want to be much more, I don't want to give up the universal and go with Mignolo, what is called pluralist, pluriversal in that, because Phule certainly in that sense would be critique of. And plus decolonial theory also is a very vague theory in a lot of sense. There are a lot of name throwing, name dropping. So in that sense, there is still space for us, at least for this side of it, to appropriate or to learn, at least to take something what is good in the colonial theory and reject what is objectionable in that sense. There's no need to be a either take or give it. Okay. Then the thing about Bali is that, as I was trying to say, is that Phule is trying to communicate with his constituency, that is the Shudras and Atishudras. And Phule is not trying, knows very well that abstract theoretical arguments, don't apply. So he has to make the hero and villains. He has to make the villain into a hero. So he has to tell the story that the good guy has been made into a bad guy, and the bad guy is actually the good guy. So what he does is so he wants to tell the story from the point of view of what has been shown as a bad guy. This tradition has been there in a lot of traditions, I think. Yes, for example, I have read a story about how Duryodhan's actual name is Suyodhan, right? In that sense. So in that sense, he is trying to shift our point of view or perspective and say that who is called Rakshasa. In fact, he uses the word Rakshasa, how the word Rakshasa becomes a bad word. Instead of being Rakshaks, it ends up being a bad word. So in that sense, he's retelling the story in a way that is which has been done by not just Phule. I think Phule is one of, at least one of the early, but the others also have been doing, telling the story from the underdog. Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we have a
There's
very
one more message.
Chanda Asani is asking, I think, is the supposedly good of colonialism has to be taken the same would be said about Hinduism. What is Jyotirao Phule's and your take in it?
Yeah, is the good of
Colonialism
uh,
has to be taken the same would be said about Hinduism?
my whole problem with the question is it seems to see only colonialism in one side. You know, both are colonialisms, right? And for the problem, that's what with this dominant way of decolonizing is much more focused on the bad guy, the European colonizer. Somewhere down the line, the Hindu colonizer has, you know, even if you say there is the so-called the good side to what we call Hindu colonization or something. So I don't think Phule would be Phule or Ambedkar would be objecting to it if it has a good side. But what is that good side has to be.
No, there is no good side, I think, for Phule. I think in Ambedkar, they have good side. They
What?
understood Buddhism.
No, but Buddhism and Hinduism are two different things, right?
Yes, yes. And also for Ambedkar, Kabir was one of his guru. Then Phule.
So that is what I'm trying to say is that Ambedkar's critique is not, I've been saying for a long time, Ambedkar's critique of Hinduism is not an emotional cry against it. It's a very intellectual, moral critique of Hinduism. And I don't think we can say that to Phule also. If there is equality in any form, whether it is inequality in Islam or anywhere, I think they would critique it. At least at the fundamentals of all are equal in front of God, he thinks. And therefore, there's a lot of rhetoric in what Phule is saying. So we have to be clear, we have to be careful about it. That doesn't mean he's giving a clean sheet to Hinduism or Christianity, sorry, Islam and Christianity. They are using this as a critique against their what they see is their immediate threat. You know, so in that sense, that doesn't mean the Phule is completely in awe with Christianity or in awe with Britishers or in awe with that. It's a rhetoric. We need to not forget the rhetorical side because he's not in a seminar room. He's in he's speaking to, in fact, the language apparently is much more acerbic, much more pungent, and therefore he uses a lot of language that if you listen to him apparently is, you might find it politically incorrect.
Thank you, Dr. Dara. It was really very enriching session, as always, like your classroom. So, on behalf of Gandhian School of Democracy and Socialism, I really feel very honored to have such a beautiful and insightful deliberation. And I am very thankful to all our distinguished participants, Professor Gyan Gului, Professor Anand Kumar Giri. Professor Anand Kumar has also joined for some time, but due to his network connection, he was not able to attend. But the recording will be sent to all of you and him also. I really very thankful to Dr. Alok Bajpai ji from GSDS, Dr. Veronica ji, Professor Desai, Pratima Soni ji, and all friends who continuously engage with our GSDS forum. We invite for your kind engagement also in coming sessions. We organize weekly dialogue. It is initiated by Professor Anand Kumar, and with his uh, advice and kind suggestions, we will invite some more profound speakers around the world to share their visions and thoughts about making this world full of justice, having a sense of democracy, and quest for egalitarian approach also. So thank you so much for
And
all
thank
of
you
you.
from my side to everyone who was patiently listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.